So, good afternoon. I'm John Leach. I'm the President and CEO of Winquest Engineering Corporation. I'm here today representing our Winquest Commercial Cybersecurity Division. And as you can see by the screen, we're going to try something completely different, curing cybersecuriphobia. We're going to learn about it. We're going to learn about what it is. We're going to learn about the 5 fears. And then we're going to learn specifically how to mitigate those fears. And then we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A. And hopefully we'll have some fun as well as learn. So this is not news to anybody here. We know that a single cyber incident can damage, potentially destroy an organization. And our observation from being in the field for 6 years now, doing assessments, pen testing, incident response, et cetera, is that most organizations are ignoring the risk. We hear all kinds of excuses. You see them on the board. You probably hear them too. We're too small. If you have money, you're not too small. We don't have anything anybody would want. No, you have money and you have data. Or my favorite, we did an assessment for a $700 million manufacturer retailer, and we found Conficker on their production floor. And when we briefed the CEO, that's what he said. I'm not worried about that. The IT people about fell out of their chairs. But what do, right? You say thank you very much, and you move on to the next client. So over the course of the 5+ years, we've interviewed informally, meetings, conferences, clients, well over 100 senior managers. It's not just managers, it's senior managers, the people that are responsible for making the risk management decisions in the organization. And what we found, based on our observation experience, a common thread, and we're going to talk about that, fear and or anxiety. So we broke it out did some analysis, broke it out into 5 major fears, and then we wanted to propose remedies for each, because as you know, if you can identify a client's point of pain and address it, you have a much better chance of them allowing you to help them. So, what is cybersecuriphobia? There it is. The fear or anxiety of taking necessary actions to reduce the risk of a cyber incident. Now, is it really a phobia? Look, the bottom line is we're not making light of phobias. We understand that they are serious things that have very negative impact on people's lives. So we wanted to see if this really was a phobia and give ourselves a little credibility. So we went to the DSM-5, the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, and we looked at page 197, and it had the definition of a specific phobia. Now, typically I wouldn't read the slide, but the print is kind of small to cram it all in here. So there are very specific criteria for a specific phobia, and they're on the screen there, and I'll quickly cover them. So there's a marked fear or anxiety about the object or situation. I think we'd all agree. We've all had managers and senior managers who they just don't want to talk about it. And that's really just the end of it. And why? Because they're fearful or they have anxiety about talking about it. The object or situation always provokes immediate fear or anxiety. You know, I talk to these managers and I look them in the eye, and they certainly have anxiety, and maybe even a few had some fear. No doubt about it. The object or situation is actively avoided or endured with intense fear or anxiety. There's no doubt about that. You want to never get invited back to a party while you're in there and say, hey, everybody, how about that Experian breach, you know? Man, that was really something, huh? I'm just waiting for my money to get stolen. You'll never be invited back to that party. So it's a good strategy if you don't ever want to go to that party. But yeah, it's not a very popular thing. People are going to avoid not only the conversation, but you too. So the fear anxiety is out of proportion to the actual danger posed by the object or situation. And we say no. We say it does meet this criteria because the bottom line is, if we know that ransomware is likely to happen, and We know that backups, having an incident response plan, tabletop exercises greatly reduce the risk of something terrible happening to our company. Well, we know that it's not that bad. But the senior managers and the managers are scared to death because they think there's nothing that can be done. We know better. We know something can be done. But they think nothing can be done, and they freak out over a situation that we could help them take care of with some minor disruption in the business instead of something more catastrophic. I would say it is definitely persistent. I would say it's lasted 6 years or more based on our experience. It's not going away, and it's going to get worse. So, causes clinically significant distress. I would call ulcers clinically significant distress. And again, if you want to, impairment in social situations, you want to go out and make people mad at you, go out to a party and talk about the latest breaches. And we hope, the last one, we hope that it's not better explained by another mental disorder. There's a lot of jokes there that we won't even go into. All right, so let's get right down to the 5 major fears that we've discovered over our 5 years of field research. People say, have you done a white paper on this? I'm like, no, there's no formal research. I don't have sites to quote authoritative sources. We just have our experience. So after Interop, there will be an article written about this that will give you some more information. We're not going to be able to cover everything in depth today, but there you go. Okay, so fear of the unknown and known. I won't read these to you. We're going to cover the first one, and so let's get started. Yeah, how many people right now are like, what the heck's, oh man. Don't you feel bad when somebody's trying to give a presentation and it goes haywire? You kind of cringe inside. That gives you just a little, yes, this is deliberate. It gives you just a little taste of what management feels when you try and talk to them about cybersecurity. I've had actually people who say, uh-oh, yeah, right? That's not supposed to happen. Oh my God, what's going on? Now, there's kind of a subset of fear of the unknown, and it's called fear of the known. So I had to get approval from Interop to show the next slide. I do apologize in advance. You may find it disturbing, and I just feel fair to forewarn you. And I just hope that nobody is terribly upset or loses any sleep tonight because of what's going to come next. If you want to leave, you can. All right, last chance. Right? Fear of the known. Oh my gosh, what the heck is he going to show next? This is freaking me out. I gave a few warm-ups of this presentation to kind of fine-tune it, and I was at a Chamber of Commerce group, and I had a woman sitting down in front, and before I showed the slide, she was like, she was freaked out, because, her imagination was running wild, But, again, it gives you a small taste of fear of the known. Now, what's going on? He's told me something terrible because it's going to come up. What's going on? All right, so let's talk about it a little bit. What's happening out there right now is due to increasing coverage of all these events, we learn enough to alarm us, but we don't learn enough information to have an understanding of really what happened, which would help us understand how we could prevent it. So, the news just tells us enough to scare the heck out of us. Thanks, media. And of course, because of that, we lack specific knowledge of how these cyber incidents occurred and what specific actions we could have taken to reduce our risk. So let's talk about the myth of the sophisticated attack. You'll hear this all the time. Well, company XYZ got hit with a sophisticated attack. I'll tell you that that's probably a bunch of baloney. What happened was Johnny got in there and clicked on something he shouldn't, downloaded the malware payload, and game over. That's not a sophisticated attack, but they'll tell you it is. And who's to argue? Only the incident response team is going to know the real truth. So every attack seems to be a sophisticated attack, when in fact it's not. But the effect is, oh my God, a sophisticated attack. They could get anybody at any time. We're toast. Again, more fear of the unknown, when in fact, it's not as bad as all that. So we don't know where to start, so we experience fear, paralysis. Well, we don't. Senior management, fear, paralysis. How about some mitigation? All right, education and awareness. I know it's easy, but some education of the the employees, the working level folks who are most susceptible, because they're on the front lines with the phones and clients and all that, educate them on what to do, what not to do, when to be suspicious. Just do some cybersecurity awareness training. They're your first line of defense against the social engineers out there, or your weakest link. And don't go alone. If you think that it's only happening to you, or that the cyber criminals are only targeting you, that's pretty lonely. It's also, loneliness breeds anxiety and fear. Join one of the 24 ISACs that are out there. There's one for electrical services, there's financial services, there's health, there's even one for IT. And these organizations these are member-driven organizations to share information so that you're not alone. There's the URL right there. All right, so the second one, fear of an impossible task. We've all had things in our life that make us just go, man, I do not know how I'm going to get through this. I just don't know how I'm going to accomplish this. It doesn't have to be IT related. It could be, parenting or how are you going to send your kids to college nowadays, something like that. But the bottom line is, we know we must do something, but we're paralyzed by the immensity of the task, and we have no idea where to begin. IT personnel are already overwhelmed with their primary task of making information available. How many IT folks here have free time on the job? How about that? Must be challenging, huh? Of course it is. It's nearly an impossible task to do IT like you're supposed to, and then pile on cybersecurity or IT security things on top. All right, so nobody has free time. I guess we got that point across. So here's an example. There's a German research firm in 2017, it's probably worse from last year, 121 million new malware programs. And it's things like that, little snippets like that, to just make senior managers go, oh, we're toast. How are we supposed to defend against 121 million new things that can harm us just from that year alone? Well, we know how to do that, but we've got to help educate them. Now, for the immense task, the project managers in the room will say, well, look, we're going to baseline our activity. That'll give us a place to measure from, and we're going to break this task into bite-sized chunks, because we're not going to try and do everything at one time. That's not smart financially. It's certainly not smart because your upper management, if you're in a typical company, is not going to understand most of what you're telling them. So you're breaking it into bite-sized chunks not only for your sanity, but also so that you can explain to them, kind of provide them a roadmap of how we're going to get to be more secure. And you're, of course, going to tell them no amount of money is going to totally make us safe. Because that's the next one, fear of the cost. There is still a misunderstanding that if enough money is spent on hardware and software, that safety is achieved. And we know that that's not true. It helps, but we know there is no safety. All you can do is reduce your risk. Not only that, the criminals know that too, which is why today about a third of cyber attacks begin by some sort of social engineering, up 19% a few years ago, according to IBM and Ponemon. The criminals aren't silly. They know, why should I butt my head up against this new technology when I can just call John and get him to reveal his username and password? Yeah, much easier, much more successful. So we hear all the time, well, it's okay, we're in the cloud. Yeah, good. That's a great step. It eliminates a lot of security headaches and risk transference over the cloud provider. And then you ask them, that's great, so how do your folks access the data that you have in the cloud? Well, they get on their computer and they log in. Oh, yeah, right? You still have a vulnerability there. You still have your people, you still have those desktop terminals, and once somebody gives up credentials, now, doesn't matter whether you're in the cloud or not, they have access to your data because they have credentials to get into the cloud. So mitigation, employee awareness training, you'll hear it again and again and again. but also a low-cost vulnerability assessment. Yes, there are such things, but we know there are companies out there that will charge or try and charge a two-person investment advisor firm $30,000 to do an assessment. We know that because we had one call us with that information. They're just not going to be able to afford that. I mean, even though they have to comply with the same SEC regulations as Morgan Stanley or any Charles Schwab and any other big brokerages firms, they're just not going to. They're going to take their chances. We know this for a fact because they said, I'll take my chances. Now, we did actually help that client in that case, but there are many others who they just won't, they can't. It's too big of a chunk of money. I once had a CFO tell me, he said, cybersecurity is really not going to become mainstream until it stops becoming a capital expense and becomes an operating cost. And it's like, yeah. So the struggle for all of us is to try and add cybersecurity budget money in as an operating cost, so every year you've got something to work from. It's better now than it was when he actually said that, but there are still a lot of companies that say, well, if I give you $200K for this technology, are we good? Will you go away now? No. I'll come back for $200K for something else. But, right? So that's the capital expense mentality. I gave you guys $200,000. Why aren't we safe? Well, because I need $200K more for training or whatever it is. All right, we get the point. So I love this. Imagine that pulled up in front of your neighbor's house. I look at the dents on that thing and I'm like, those are some rodents of unusual size, no doubt about it. Now, as human beings, we are world-class athletes at jumping to conclusions. And here's some examples. I went to the doctor today. Oh, you're sick. What's wrong? Or pest control vehicle pulls out front with the big rat on the front. Oh my gosh, you have rats. Maybe you have roaches, bats. If you live in the desert, scorpions, snakes, ghosts. Or, hey, we hired a cybersecurity firm. Oh, you got a breach. What's wrong? Whose data did you lose? If you want to have fun, well, okay, don't really do this, but if you want to think about having fun, one day when you go back into the office, go into your executive team at one of their meetings or a board meeting and say, by the way, I just want to let you know, good morning, everybody. We hired a cybersecurity firm this morning, and watch the reaction on their faces. Yeah. And then watch how many get up and go to the men's and ladies' room afterwards. You'll scare them because they assume right away, what's wrong? Oh my God, the IT person said we hired a cybersecurity firm. OMG. When in fact, no, you had an annual physical. By the way, you're in outstanding health too. Good for you. No, you're just doing termite prevention. And then the last one, no, we're just doing an assessment to better protect our information, our customer data, and improve our security. But again, we all know the first things are what people think right away. It's always bad, 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 bad. Assume the worst. So this is interesting because when I first put this slide together, I was focusing really just on your company, a single company. And if you can get out in front of these thoughts of it's a disaster, what's wrong, it's always the worst case scenario, and you can actually do some what we call proactive perception management. And what that is don't let your customers think that the worst is going to happen. Be right up front and tell them, by the way, we're having a security firm in next week. We're doing it to conduct an audit to better protect our customers' privacy and data. And then don't be afraid to put something on your website or on your literature that says you did that. And so when I first put this together, I was like, good, that would be great for your company. You'll have a super competitive advantage because 90% of your competitors have cybersecuriphobia and aren't doing this. And then, actually today, I was just kind of looking at this one last time before I came down, and it dawned on me, businesses, particularly, are competitive. What's going to happen when company A puts something out there that says, we had an assessment done, we do cybersecurity awareness training for all of our employees, and they all passed. Company B, C, D are going to be like, hey, whoa, wait a minute. Company A is bragging about something. And that natural business competition is going to encourage the rest of those companies to find out what's going on and potentially jump on the bandwagon, which is better for everybody. All right. I've put the timer at 50 minutes, but since I wasn't supervised, I didn't turn it on. So I'm going to have to look at my phone here. All right, so this one is the most difficult to mitigate. It's also the most time-consuming. One of the reasons it's most difficult. Because everybody's afraid of being embarrassed or looking bad, especially on the job. I have two stories about this. One of them you see up there. I was at an investment advisor conference. The audience were chief compliance officers responsible for SEC compliance for their firms or brokerages. There was a regional director from the SEC that was up front talking about how the SEC was going to start looking at cybersecurity and making sure that they were compliant, et cetera, et cetera. And the tension of the room, you could feel it, because he also said, but don't worry, we're not going to hold chief compliance officers personally liable. Well, of course, nobody believed him, because the mere fact that he mentioned it, people were like, what? And I was sitting in the back, and it's a woman who was the chief compliance officer for a large firm. I said, what do you think of this? She said, I don't know, but I'm afraid of getting into trouble. Right? The other story is I talked to the president of a very large manufacturing trade association. And he told me, he said, we have a problem. He said, because most of these senior managers, these owners, these presidents, these CEOs, they're older and they're afraid. And I'm like, what are they afraid of? He said, they're afraid of not knowing what's going on and being embarrassed in front of their boards, in front of their peers, in front of their C-level people they're responsible for. He said, and they're not going to admit it, and you're not going to be able to train them unless you can get them one-on-one behind closed doors. And even then, you've got a challenge. Because the folks that are 60 and over, if you're in here, you're an exception, obviously, right? But if you're 60 and over, you did not grow up with computers. You did not grow up with cell phones. Long-distance calls were $1 a minute, sometimes more. And if you wanted to talk to your friends, you got on your bike or you got in the car and you went and you actually saw them. Or, heaven forbid, if you were really patient, you wrote a letter. What's going on out there with IT, and specifically cybersecurity, is scaring the heck out of these senior people that are in charge of their organizations. And they're not going to admit it, and they're not going to seek out education and training on their own. That's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to figure out a way, if you have one of those folks, to get one-on-one with them, to do something, to figure out how you can help educate them in a way that they'll actually allow you to do. And again, it involves developing trust. We know that developing trust is very time-consuming. It should be easier to achieve trust, should be easier to achieve with an in-house team, right? We all work together, I know you, you know me, right? So I trust you that you're going to do the right thing for the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there may be exceptions. You may be the IT whiz and trying to get people to understand cybersecurity. Well, they may not want to listen to you because you're the IT person, not the cybersecurity person. The classic example of this is Jesus. Jesus had to leave Nazareth to preach. Because if he'd have stayed in Nazareth, he would have always been known as the carpenter's son. Nobody would have listened to him. So you may have to bring in an outside consultant, an outside firm. They should still work for you, but that may be what's required. You may be pigeonholed into a certain role that your company is just not going to see you in any other role. That's for you to determine and figure out a way out of. But that is one possible exception. So if you do outsource, a good firm is going to tell you, you've got this many vulnerabilities, here's how you can fix them, here's our report, here's graphs and charts. But a great firm is going to give you enough information and work with you as an ally so that you can actually leverage the report, leverage that information as a reason to get more resources. And oh, by the way, we had a panel earlier today that was like, well, you know, how do you get the CFO to loosen the purse strings? It's easy, you don't. The CEO does. You need to be making sure that you're in touch with the CEO, because the CEO, the owner, the founder, the board of directors, those people are the ultimate risk managers of the organization. When the breach happens and the lawyers start circling the company, the IT director will probably get fired. The CFO will probably get fired. But it's the owner, the president, whoever's in charge that's going to get sued. Because nowadays you don't just sue the company, you also personally sue the person in charge. So that's why it's not the CFO you need to be getting favor with, it's the ultimate risk manager of that organization, whoever they may be. They'll tell the CFO to loosen the purse strings. Much easier. All right, so how about some key takeaways, and then we'll do some Q&A. So fight fear with knowledge, right? The fear of the known, the fear of the unknown. These are knowledge fears. They're countered by education, awareness, and just not only your own, educate the folks in your organization. Don't go it alone. As an example, you can join an ISAC, and you won't be alone. There's 24 ISACs, various industry groups. You probably fit into one of those. Debunk that sophisticated attack myth. We'll never know how these things happen because we're not on an incident response team. But let your management know that, okay, boss, it probably wasn't a sophisticated attack based on what you've seen and read out there. Johnny clicked on the wrong thing and downloaded payload. And our company, can take steps to avoid that by simply doing some basic cybersecurity awareness training. If it's a big project, and of course it's going to be if you're starting from scratch, break it into manageable pieces. Don't try and do everything at once. You won't get the resources and you'll just scare the heck out of everybody in the company. And they already have cybersecuriphobia. Don't make the fear of the cost any worse than it already is. Proactive, right? Gain that marketing advantage. Maybe you'll lead the way in your industry sector where everybody will be like, I want to be like your company. I want to be like your company because I think you have a competitive advantage now because you're doing something that the public should appreciate and I'm not. Can't hurt. Worst thing that can happen is your security improves. And if you outsource, find a firm that work with you as an ally. When we work with firms, we like to be on premises because even though we're doing our scanning and we're looking at the organization, we also answer questions from the IT staff and from the cybersecurity staff. And it's educational for them. Now, we have clients now all over the world. So we can't always travel on site because travel expense is more expensive than the service. But the point is, we always like to work with the IT directors, the CIOs. But here's an interesting point. When we started this, we thought we should be working with the IT directors and the CIOs. Those are the people we started to contact in the organizations. Guess what happened? Go away. I don't want to talk to you. You're a threat. I got it. You're going to make me look bad. Go away. It was rare to find an enlightened IT director or CIO person at that level who actually said, yeah, I want to talk to you because I know I got problems, but I don't know exactly what they are, and I'd like to know so I can start working on them. I imagine that most, if not all of you, are those enlightened clients because you're here, and that's a great thing. I think that was one of the stories. Boom, boom, boom. Yep, I'll do it. So, it's real, and you can see that the first steps to reduce management, cybersecurity fear, and anxiety, so that they can take necessary actions to protect the organization. So that concludes my formal part of the presentation. All right, how about some question and answer, Q&A? Yes, so let's go in the back.
You said earlier that $30,000 was too much when it came to the security assessment, and you were suggesting low-cost one. What exactly is a low-cost, price?
Well, we will tell you $3,950. But I caveat that because that is a one-day abbreviated vulnerability assessment with 2 cybersecurity engineers doing 4 hours of analysis, 4 hours of scanning, about an hour or 2 of analysis, build an executive PowerPoint, present that to the executive team. It's about an 8 or 9 hour day for each of them. So clients aren't stupid. They look at the price, they divide by the hours of labor that you provided, because you're on site whenever we can be, and they look at that rate, $250 roughly, and they say, okay, that's a good value. The 2-person firm that got quoted $30,000 had a good idea it was going to happen. Maybe because here's the kicker. Their network consisted of 2 laptop computers, 1 desktop, and a printer. That was it. How can you justify charging $30,000 for that? So that it happens out there. So, yeah. Okay. Next. Sir.
Do you have any insights about how to convince somebody who's a risk taker? I mean, I work for a sales organization. He's just been a risk taker for decades.
Mm-hmm. As in, I don't want to spend the money, I'll take the chance? Well, if he's that, my recommendation, you need cyber insurance right away. Transfer that risk, right? He's going to be a risk taker. If you can't change him, then you need to help him do some risk transference. And that's where cybersecurity insurance or cyber insurance would be a great help. If you can't control his risk taking, then try and control everybody else's. Again, I don't know your firm, but if you've got employees, try and make sure that they're not emulating the boss and clicking on anything that comes in, and all the poor security practices we see. So that would be the #1 recommendation for the risk taker. Who else? I'll be here all afternoon. It's the last session, the last day. I don't fly out till tomorrow morning. So we want to call this. I'll come right down here and sit at the table, and we can continue this conversation. We really want to continue the conversation. We'll go have steaks out in the steakhouse, because we love this stuff. We'll talk about it all day. And we gave out the gift cards, so there we go. Anybody else?
Where are you based?
Yeah, I'm sorry, say again?
Where are you located?
We're located in Severn, Maryland. It's between Baltimore, Washington, D.C., outside of cozy Fort Meade, Maryland. And we all, does everybody know what's going on in Baltimore right now? Yeah. They are toast. Well, yeah, because we would have said right away, you have no policies and procedures, you have no incident response plan, and where are your backups? Right, I mean, it's a good point. Even that CAVA, as we call it, that abbreviated vulnerability assessment, would have at least given them a start point. Now, as I understand it, they had a CIO or an IT person that actually told them, you need to do these things, and they didn't do them. They didn't give them a budget or anything. So at least there was somebody like you in the city government that said, we got a problem, I need some resources to fix it, and they didn't give them to them. And look what happened. That's probably a minimum of $250,000 just for the incident response and the legal remediation. It may run into much more than that. And when you consider the downtime, the city can't do anything. No taxes can be paid, no payments can be made. The city's going to lose millions of dollars that they may never recoup. And being from that area, and being in DC, the city can't afford that. The people of the city can't afford that, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to pay. That road's not going to get fixed. Those derelict houses aren't going to get torn down and new things built there. The infrastructure, right? DC and Baltimore, same. The infrastructure carrying the water there bursts all the time because the pipes are 100 years old. How are those going to get replaced now? So, yeah, absolutely. They should have done something. Anybody else? Conversation? Yes, sir.
Is there such a thing as being too paranoid, or have you seen clients that are overpaid, they have one attempt or anything and you go all in?
So there's an old phrase that somebody told me one time, I always remember. You're only paranoid if they're not out to get you, right? So, too paranoid, I guess, well, it's a good question, because if the organization is so risk averse that you can't operate, then the cyber criminals haven't taken you down. You've shot yourself in the foot because you're handcuffing and nobody can get the work done. So it's a good point. You can go way overboard and shut your own operation down simply because the people that need to do work can't do the work because of draconian security measures. So yeah, it's a balance. You go overboard, the cyber criminals don't need to take you down. You've done it to yourself. Good point. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So one of the things that I face a lot is our management will approve security measures and will be in the implementation phase, and all of a sudden they say, oh, this is going to impact the business process too much. Our users can't deal with this MFA prompt. What if they don't have their phone? What if you stop sales from giving a demo? I feel like it's kind of almost its own separate category of a fear of impacting the business.
Right. Well, it's easy for me to say up here, but of course, for whatever reason, they weren't aware of the impact of the changes that you were making. And easy for me to say, try and let them know before you get permission and start implementing something, what the potential consequences could be to the business operations. And I don't know your organization structure, but getting with the chief operations officer or somebody like that, just one-on-one, getting them to understand, they could tell you, well, that's a problem because that security protocol is not going to allow us to do this. How can we compromise and work that? Obviously, it's a little late for that for this particular instance, but you may have to back up on that a little bit because we don't want to have that reputation that IT already has in some places as a cult of no, because then they just ignore us and go around us, which is worse. So, yes, sir.
To help with what he was saying, there's a talk yesterday. He said whenever he comes across someone who says no, he says fine. He prints off a sheet called security exception form, takes it to him and says, you must sign this. And then usually when they have to sign their name to it, they're like, they get to back off of it. So,
accountability and personal responsibility. Yeah, good point. Who else? Yes, ma'am.
What's happening to Baltimore happened to Atlanta in March 2018.
That's right.
They wanted to have to pay $20 million to recover.
Yes, they did. How many times do we have to relearn the same lessons over and over and over again? And this is where the criminals, they thrive. We don't learn our lessons. When I say we, human beings.
Yeah, but criminals win.
They do. Well, and if you get into a meeting of business owners and you apply Chatham House rules, or like we say in our area, non-attribution, where what's said in the room stays in the room and nobody's name is ever attributed to what was said, and ask the question, how many of you got hit with ransomware? Over half the hands are going to go up. We've seen it again and again and again. Businesses are getting killed by ransomware out there. And what are they doing? They're paying the ransom. Yeah, because you're looking at, it's actually somebody, in a briefing I was at, I think in Austin a couple months ago, they said that there was research that showed when a company got hit with ransomware, the thing that took the longest, the most effort, and was the most nerve-wracking was trying to figure out how to get a Bitcoin wallet and what the heck it is. That took more time than to actually deal with the actual ransomware attack itself. And so, of course, their recommendation was somebody in your organization needs to be able to have a Bitcoin wallet and already know how to transfer that Bitcoin just in case your organization gets hit. Yeah. Who else? That's it? Aw. People want to go eat, don't you? You want to go eat, you want to fly home? Thank you, ma'am.